It says it's recording now.
Yeah. So it's recording to cloud. I don't know if that's City of Raleigh cloud or not, but we'll go from here. I'm going to pause this for now.
To whoever set the
just for everybody's awareness tonight, we are recording this meeting, so others that cannot join will be able to see this presentation online in a couple of days. We'll also make sure that our slide deck is available online on the City of Raleigh's website as well. Just a few housekeeping items. If you have a question, we'd like to save questions for the end. So we have a number of things to go through. Don't worry, we can go back in the slide deck and answer your questions. But if you do have questions, you can populate them into the chat box by doing that in a desktop right-hand corner. There's a little chat button, and you can type your questions there, or you can raise your hand however you feel comfortable tonight. It's a little bit of a small group, so it'd be a robust discussion here, and looking forward to discussing our recommendations with you here shortly. Okay. This is a community check-in. We are working on our final reports that would be submitted here in a couple of weeks. But we wanted to spend tonight a little bit of time of what we've been doing over the last few months, what our more detailed recommendations are concerning funding and approaches to this corridor. I just want to note that these are our project goals when we started, which is implementing the equitable transit-oriented development process, public outreach to you and a community that builds trust and understanding of the work ahead, and identifying regulatory changes to the city zoning policies, understanding what types of affordable housing investments need to occur along this corridor, understanding any additional bike and pedestrian safety that's outside of the bus rapid transit line. How do we connect people to New Bern? And then any urban design interventions that may need to be identified and funded for in future phases as well. We've done quite a lot of work since our kickoff in spring of last year with our workshops in the fall. We had a check-in at the end of the year in December. And tonight we're doing this little check-in just to show you where we're at, noting that spring and summer will have additional presentations at City Council as well. We had a pretty robust engagement process to date, understanding ideas and concerns both on community side, but connecting with youth and even developers and other stakeholders in the area that are looking to build new development, but also understanding what kinds of development would be more amiable in these areas of the community. We developed a set of guiding principles. These are 4 sort of umbrella principles that we're really moving towards. New Bern is a connector, not just the literal sort of connector as a bus rapid transit line, but it's connecting these different communities together through transit and walkability. That we need to make sure that we're growing together and we're not leaving people behind. And how do we make sure that people that live here today can still live and thrive while welcoming new residents into the area? We want to embrace New Bern's personalities and making sure that the quality of design is matching the different personalities along the corridor. And we want to be prepared for change. We know change is happening, and we want to make sure we're proactive in our policies and approaches. We're really going to just dive into our recommendations and a reminder of a few of them. And we're starting tonight with community and economic development. This is really the meat of what we heard from community members in the last round of consultation, was they really want to know, what does this all mean? When's it happening? What kinds of money are we recommending around these policies? And when we talk about community and economic development and housing, we have 2 sort of mandates here. One is that allocation of equity fund, and even beyond that, is there any additional funding that may need to be required? As a reminder, the equity fund is part of the penny tax program, and is looking at about $4 million a year to allocate for things like affordable housing, displacement mitigation, and any other items that may help ensure that we're growing together. And then second is prioritizing affordability and deeply understanding any mitigation needed for potential displacement in the corridor. We know that with new development, people will be shifting around in the community potentially, but we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on that and finding ways to make sure people can still live and thrive in the community that they've lived in for so long. From that, we've developed 4 policy areas. One is housing for all. That's creating long-term, deep, affordable housing units through zoning and incentives and direct subsidies. 2 is deepest affordability. We heard a lot of concerns around it's not just people that live in the average median income, but that deeper affordability of below 30% and below area median income. And how do we prioritize that? And we want to celebrate Black Raleigh and the businesses that are in the sort of western area of the corridor, and opportunity for all, that we're supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs as well through our recommendations. So when we talk about housing for all and deepest affordability, our first rounds of actions include increasing the supply of subsidized rental units affordable to renters with incomes between 30 and 60% area median income. Our recommendation is between $4.8 and $9.6 million in the short term. This is meant to be an injection and a monitoring of supplying those, whether it's through private development programs or working with affordable housing programs, creating a fund that will allow us to do that over time. Number 2 is acquire land to support developing rental units affordable to renters with incomes between 30 and 60% area median income. This is looking at potential strategic sites along the corridor that would yield opportunities for the city to work with affordable housing developers to deliver those units in a long-term area. Third is preserving existing affordable rental units. That's what we call the naturally occurring affordable units, or even the affordable units that exist along the corridor. This is a little bit of a longer term at $5.6 to $11.2 million in investment. And it's looking to make sure that the existing affordable rental units are at a state of good repair or are able to fund and finance themselves in a longer term period. We also are looking at existing homeowners and supporting current homeowners with funding for repairs of their homes. That is between $300,000 and $600,000 annually for 4 years. Noting that part of our policy here is to monitor and advise on a yearly basis to see if we need more funding, if that funding is creating an impact, what that means for residents. And so that's why you see these ranges in our proposals is that it could fluctuate with year on end depending on availability. We're also looking at increasing accessibility of home ownership for low and moderate income residents. That's an additional $300,000 to $600,000 annually for 4 years. Another big ticket approach is the city formally acquiring the former DMV site and developing it to support affordable housing and economic development. So we see that side as a big opportunity for affordable housing, but also maybe some office, large format retailer on the ground floor, like a grocery store. And so this is a strategic site for the city of Raleigh in that mind, and we want to find a way to acquire that from the state. Moving in, this has a lot of policies. I apologize for the length of this tonight, but support current homeowners with home ownership costs. This is a little bit different than the repair piece. This could be property tax relief, and that we're estimating between $150,000 and $500,000 annually. That doesn't have a 4-year limit. We want to see that run as long as possible. And sort of a low cost short term is working with the city to remove any code barriers to affordability. That could be through streamlining approval processes for missing middle housing, or the repair process if it requires a permit. The city's committed to looking at making sure it's easy and affordable for people to come in and make sure that whether it's new construction or repair, it's an easy, high quality customer service component. When we talk about Celebrate Black Raleigh, we're looking at a number of potential items here. One is develop a corridor alliance with St. Augustine University. This is a $200,000 annual investment. This could pay for programming, cultural programming, and strategic economic development strategies of attracting businesses or retaining students in the area post-graduation. We also are looking at partnering with St. Augustine to jointly support mixed-use development, whether that's along Oakwood or at Tarboro. They have noted that they need additional housing for their students, but also see this in an alumni and business development way of connecting deeper into the community. We also propose to plan and implement public art and gateway features that celebrate Black history along the corridor. This is a medium-term cost between $500,000 and $1 million. We heard a lot of the community, and this is a longer-term component, so we don't have a total cost to it yet, which is creating a community museum to celebrate that history, as well as creating a community-based center where various city agencies, contractors, partners can work directly with residents. This sort of brick and mortar piece is really important to the continued conversation. We do know while this is long-term, we see this could move into that shorter term as we dive in a little bit deeper with our agencies and contractors to move that forward. But at this time, it's a little bit more complex than we thought to begin, but it is a commitment to the community to find a way to make this happen. Our last policy is that opportunity for all, supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs. The first action is that small business alliance ecosystem and workforce development that's creating with City of Raleigh time a stronger business ecosystem along New Bern, where the city is supporting new initiatives, connecting with businesses on a more frequent basis, and having more of a direct line of communication. We want to pair financial assistance with technical assistance and business planning. This is an injection of $5 to $10 million over a 2-year period, plus $150,000 annually supporting staff to help with that technical assistance. So that $5 to $10 million is the actual sort of potential financial assistance, and then the technical one is the $150,000 annually. We also want to propose increasing funding for Facade grant and outreach to business owners within the corridor. This is an additional $250,000 a year that is above the city's current funding program. And these are all the sort of recommendations for community and economic development. We heard loudly from the community that there was a lot of concerns about housing. We've taken a deep look on the types of housing needs and funding, and these recommendations will go forward to council. While they are in sort of ranges, these are sort of minimums and maximums that we're looking at in this corridor. Noting that these need to be monitored annually and reported back to the community to show any adjustments to that, any additional funding that may be necessary, or a refocus based on community need that happens on an annual basis. Moving from there, in our mobility side, we just wanted to highlight a few things to you. This was our previous map. Some of the commentary that we had was that we needed to refine the recommendations, and we we are happy to also announce that we've identified some immediate improvements to be implemented under the current transportation bond, and we'll walk through a few of those right now. So this map hasn't really changed dramatically. We've just sort of streamlined some of the annotation around our plan. But what we want to do highlight is walk through a few of these projects. So there's about $5.6 million available still in the current transportation bond. We've identified about 6 projects. The first is Treywork Road. This is primarily pedestrian improvements at $1.6 million, adding high visibility crosswalks and curb ramps for accessibility. As well as pocket medians and pedestrian refuges in mid-block crossing and pedestrian lighting. Project 2, on Corporation Parkway, this is a small road diet and pedestrian improvements at $810,000. And Project 3, 1C, is New Hope Road, $1 million for bike and ped improvements. These are improvements outside of the BRT project and are meant to sort of connect to communities quicker, or provide that pedestrian bike connectivity to the stations in a quicker fashion than the longer term capital planning. In the western area, a proposed project along Tarboro Street, $500,000 in street improvements. This includes traffic calming from Oakwood to Tarboro, or Oakwood to New Bern, formalizing on-street parking areas, creating high visibility crosswalks, pedestrian lighting, and accessibility curbs along the corridor. We're also proposing, sorry, this isn't Raleigh Boulevard. It's supposed to be one off. I apologize for that. $1.27 million for improvements. That includes additional pathways and crosswalks and pedestrian lighting and signage. And in the center areas, we're proposing Sunnybrook Road bike improvements at $1.27 million. Now, projects 4 and 5 are not fully funded yet. So the first few that you saw are fully funded under that. However, we have identified this and project 5, which I'll show here shortly, for improvements, but are looking as a priority for the next round of capital planning and budgeting. But because of inflation costs, et cetera, we've had to ensure that we had contingencies for the identified projects on this list. So while they're not going to be immediate, they are going to be a priority in the next round of funding. And that's that last project is the Swain and Haggard Streets, the bike and ped improvements at $570,000 to repair and replace sidewalks, create high visibility crosswalks and curb ramps, as well as connecting to the existing shared use paths. So projects 4 and 5, not fully funded yet, but we've identified it, and city transportation and city planning are looking to make sure that these are top priorities in the next round of capital planning. This shows you sort of a summary of these projects and their locations. At $5.65 million, we are hoping these occur simultaneously with New Bern improvements, the New Bern BRT program as well. Our last sort of round of recommendations is concerning zoning, and our mandate here in our last round of reviews was to identify the TOD overlay and where that should project. This is our last overlay map that we showed with existing land uses. We also had a map that showed heights and where that should go, or what kind of base heights would need to be changed along the corridor from that 3-story base to 5 with bonus, or that 5-story base up to 7 with bonus.
Phyllis Jones
or
has joined the meeting.
7-story base with 12-story bonus. And then we had this map that showed the sort of land use piece. What we have done as we've condensed all that down into one map, it was confusing for people to sort of have to check 3 different maps. We've validated and clarified the areas for the TOD overlay, and we've also refined the areas of height changes as well. And so we have a singular map now that shows all of those changes and targeted where exactly any types of base zoning would need to change, and then the height changes that would need to happen along the corridor as well. Now, this map in particular, I'm sure a lot of people will want to talk about as we move into final recommendations. However, just as a reminder on our TOD overlay component, we've really looked at what areas would most likely see economic or development changes over time. How are we maximizing development potential along the corridor and readying the areas for that? But that doesn't mean that it's changing overnight. It just means that these are the targeted areas for that higher density, walkable, TOD, transit-oriented development types along the corridor. And then the rest of the neighborhoods, if there's any sort of changes, that would be really under the missing middle bylaws that have recently been approved. So in summary, we have a wide variety of funding recommendations. We're looking to make sure that we're investing in these areas to grow around transit, that we're keeping long-term affordable housing through zoning incentives and direct subsidies, that we're making sure that we have funding for public places and spaces throughout, that we're providing affordable housing options through direct funding, and sustaining that deep affordability over time. That we're making sure that there's opportunity for all in a variety of ways for businesses and entrepreneurs along the corridor, putting pedestrians first and making sure that those connections are safe. And that's between $7 and $11 million of investment along the area. And that we believe these are the sort of strategic rounds of investment that will help ensure that we meet our overall project goals of growing together, connecting everybody to New Bern, embracing the personalities along the corridor, and readying for change as well. So I just want to note we've gone through a lot of information. We have time for an online, there'll be an online survey launching shortly. We would appreciate your feedback once you review this slide deck in a little bit more detail. Noting that in the spring, there'll be a presentation to City Council for the initiation of zoning changes and the referral to a Planning Commission for review. In the summer, there'll be 2 sets of neighborhood meetings to discuss these zoning changes and other aspects of the plan. And the summer and early fall will be Planning Commission, with the fall seeing a City Council hearing. So I want to thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions that you may have. And we're happy to go back on the slide deck as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say that people should have the ability to unmute themselves. So you can simply, if you see your name in the list of attendee participants in the meeting, you can click to unmute yourself. Or also, if you'd like to enter a question into the chat, we can also respond to them that way. So you should be able to see at the bottom of your window a little button that looks like a speech bubble from a comic strip. You can click on that, and that'll open your chat box there.
Hello, everyone. This is Marlo at Edgewater Community. How is the BRT and the whole this whole scope going to impact the vacant retail area that's up and down New Bern?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, we have examined. We know that a variety of those retail areas either have low vacancy or high vacancy, or half vacancy, particularly along like Longview Gardens, et cetera. We see those as opportunities for transformation, mixed-use development, and that's why they're included in the TOD overlay. We see them as opportunity areas, and you'll see in our final report a couple of those as example areas to show that transformation. But whatever is replaced there should have active ground floor retail in strategic areas. That's part of the TOD overlay requirements. And I think you'll start to see too a change, new types of retailers potentially coming along the corridor over time as well. So we see those as investment banks or development opportunities that would provide that sort of space for TOD.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here about time frame for completing the pedestrian improvements. The ones that were identified are meant to run concurrent or slightly after the BRT installation. So they would happen as soon as starting next year, running through 2024.
I'll also add, you know, Craig's in his list of projects was showing, you know, connecting bike and ped improvements that we were identifying, but the construction of the BRT itself, which I think is still set to break ground this year,
Yeah.
It's going to make a lot of improvements on New Bern Avenue. So we didn't talk at all about that, but building the bus line will include, you know, sidewalks on both sides of New Bern, plus a multi-use path. I think for the entire length up to the belt line, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I also want to correct it. It did say Raleigh Boulevard as a improvement. It's actually Fisher Street that was identified that would include those bike ped paths. We'll make sure the presentation that's posted has that accurate information. My apologies. Will the BRT project assist in improving the influx of panhandling on New Bern Avenue? I'm not entirely. That's probably a little bit more complex project, or not project, issue. Does the city have anything concerning homelessness strategies, or is that more of Wake County?
Homelessness services are typically managed by the county. The city does provide referral services through our Housing and Neighborhoods Department, and then in terms of permanent housing or long-term housing, the city does support a range of affordable housing options that can help people transition from housing insecurity to stable housing. But specific, responding to homelessness directly in terms of providing immediate shelter is largely a county function, and the city does contribute funding to that activity, but does not manage it directly. And yeah, I think there's, as Craig alluded to, I think the amount of panhandling does derive somewhat from larger economic issues that are not under the control of local zoning authority. So it is difficult for a plan like this to really address larger economic issues that are at this point, pretty much nationwide. So it is a difficult issue.
Thank you, John. That was a great answer. Yeah, I just was hoping that this is such a great project, I believe. And I was hoping that the amount of panhandling up and down New Bern would not deter people wanting to use the system. And it's because it's a great system. I really like the plan a lot.
Well, thank you.
There's a question here about changes to the zoning area in 27610. Is there a specific area in that area code that you may be thinking about? So zip code, not area code. happy to walk through specific parcels if somebody has a particular. Sorry, Reverend Jacqueline.
Yeah, zip code 27610 does extend very far east and south of New Bern Avenue.
Right.
So, the zoning changes that we're proposing as a result of this plan would be limited to the properties that are pretty much right along New Bern Avenue. That's where, as Craig, described in the presentation, there is the greatest potential for the new development that would be, motivated by access to the new transit service. And so that's where we see the opportunity that those zoning changes can provide through more flexible development options, and in some situations more dense development options. So yeah, we're really focusing on the corridor that is going to have access to the bus service, not really beyond that area.
Just the corridor or any other building project?
Like, are you asking, is the city going to build anything?
No, I'm asking for the changes, for the zoning changes, because obviously this project to accommodate have to make some changes in the zoning. So I just need to know if it's just for the corridor that's gonna apply the changes, or for any future construction.
Yeah, great question. So the map that you're seeing, if you're able to see our screen,
Right.
Okay, we have very targeted areas of change. Number one is changes, adding the transit-oriented development overlay district along the corridor, and that's typically in very targeted areas. We then have some small changes to base land use along the corridor as well, and those are in very small areas. And then we have height changes to the existing height changes to the existing zoning that would allow for that density bonusing. So happy to share this map with you if you want to look at it in a little bit more detail. It'll be available on the city's website as well, but we're really trying to focus on the areas of high likely to change because of its proximity to the transit line, and targeting that in height that meets community development need, as well as making sure it's compatible with existing typologies.
So we can see that on the website with all the changes with details.
Yes, we will provide a copy of this presentation online tomorrow on the city's website. If you look up New Bern Station Area Planning, City of Raleigh, there's a whole page there with information.
All right, thank you very much.
No problem. And if you have additional questions, Jason Harden, who's the project manager, feel free to send him an email. We're happy to spend time with people and talk about these changes.
All right.
There's a question here concerning BRT and TOD current end at New Hope. There's some new development happening over the after project pedestrian improvements to the that connect the neighborhood to the BRT TOD area. Yes, we are proposing in particular, and that's what happens when I try to get fancy with things. Apologies. At New Hope, we're actually proposing better pedestrian improvement along New Hope and some additional improvements as well. There may be some continued connectivity opportunities in this area, but really focus that on New Hope Road and making that a highly walkable corridor connecting to the BRT. Will these changes, we have a question here, will these changes cause removal of Cookout, Bojangle, and other businesses along New Bern Avenue and Eddington Street? So our biggest goal is to make sure if new development occurs that it considers existing businesses and they work with existing businesses so that they may come back. Let's say if a business is there and they're building a development there, that the business may come back into that space or find a new space along the corridor. Concerning Bojangles and Cookout, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but those most likely over a long period of time may relocate because that particular area, Tarboro and New Bern, is with the DMV, et cetera, has this high likely of transformation. And so the economics of those businesses may locate further out or in a more auto-centric space. But we're not, I can't predict when, if that will happen. That will be the determination of both the businesses that are there and any development that may be proposed in that area.
I'll add that one answer is no. So Cookout and Bojangles can stay there forever and ever if they want to.
Yes.
Zoning does not force anyone to move or change what they're doing if they're already existing. But if those sites were blank today and Bojangles came and said, please let me build this building, that we would not allow that. So one thing the TOD prevents new buildings that are quite so focused on cars. So like drive-through are not allowed, and both of those have drive-throughs. So, you could not build a new Cookout or Bojangles that looks like the ones that are there. They could look very different if that's what that person wanted to build, but the businesses that exist already don't have to do anything to keep operating. So it really is, if someone wants to redevelop, build something new, there are changes that would prevent that level of business that's quite so focused on cars, right? So you'd we wouldn't permit quite so much parking, we wouldn't permit drive-throughs, that kind of thing. You have to have at least 2 stories for every building. This is just in the some of the zoning that we're proposing. It's not everywhere on this picture, but for the transit zoning, we would be looking at a different style of building. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in as well. I think Ira did convey this, but when he says you could not build a new drive-through, he means if and when the transit overlay district is applied to these properties by a rezoning case. That rezoning has not occurred yet. It would be initiated in the coming months and could be completed by the end of this calendar year. And at that point, if the transit overlay district is applied to those drive-through properties, if they were removed, you could not establish a new drive-through. And then I think part of that question might have been related to the BRT construction itself. So is the addition of the BRT service to New Bern and Edenton going to require so much space in the street that it would encroach on those businesses? My understanding is that would not be the case. The city is very motivated not to impact those businesses because they are quite expensive to buy out, and we don't want to buy them. We would like for them to keep operating up until the point when someone decides to redevelop them, at which point then the TOD would require that they not be reestablished as a drive-through.
Good evening. This is Yvette Holmes with Southeast Raleigh Promise. I hope you all are doing well. I apologize for joining late. Calls ran over today. And is Megan, is it Finnegan? Is she on the line?
I don't believe so, not tonight.
Okay, but she's with the city, right?
Yep.
Okay, I was in on another presentation. I guess living in Southeast Raleigh and going down the corridor quite often, I think my questions kind of lean to what others are asking or at least inquiring about, particularly with the smaller African-American owned and Black owned businesses along the corridor right there at Jack's and with Lions Funeral Home and that sort of thing. I imagine the conversations have been going on, and are there efforts afoot to ensure that they're able to stay and redevelop and have a good, and determine what the highest and best use is for their parcels that they own along the corridor there?
The short answer is yes. I'll just go back to our community and economic development funding recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, we're looking at a series of actions here that will help both provide consultation and advice for growth of existing businesses or new businesses along the area, increasing funding to the existing Facade grant program and outreach to existing business owners within the corridor, but also that small business alliance ecosystem. Right now, it doesn't have, there's not a strong sort of broad ecosystem along the corridor, and dedicating City of Raleigh staff time to support that over a 6-year, at least in that 6-year period, to build that up. That will take time. So the short answer is yes, we're looking at those and providing direct funding to them. And also, if there's any education is key. If businesses that own their properties or are leasing are engaged in or approached by a developer, that they at least understand their rights and values of their land, so that they can participate in that as well. And then that's part of that direct communication, sustained communication beyond the construction of the BRT.
And thank you for that. And will the focus of the funding, I know the county has a new affordable housing fund that the city has helped to seed as well, to acquire land, particularly along the transit corridors. And I say corridors plural, because it's not just about New Bern, but to ensure that, the market developers don't just come in and gobble up all the property. And then we're not even as a community in a position to compete or even to acquire any of the available land along the corridor that might be up for sale. So do you already know potential or interested sellers? Those who are interested in selling their property, does the city have a good understanding or finger on their pulse?
I can't speak on behalf of the city.
Okay, just curious.
Oh, no, it's fine. We have funding though in our proposal here for housing and direct active purchasing of land that the city could support. In particular, the DMV site, getting that land purchased from the state, and then the city being able to issue, say, an RFP, a request for proposals for that land that incorporates things like deep affordable housing, ground floor retail for a large format retailer like a grocer, maybe some office space. That site is so large that you could actually do a lot of things in a 2-block area. So for us, we see that as a really strategic opportunity. The city also owns part of Duplex Village there near Raleigh Boulevard. So making sure that anybody that might be displaced through the redevelopment of that land has a space in the new project, or is connected to opportunity housing along the corridor that may fit their needs.
Okay.
Hey, Yvette.
Hey, Ira, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for all those answers, Craig. I'll add a couple other things to your questions. For the first part about the small businesses, I think this plan is very focused on trying to help the businesses that exist already, Black or minority owned or otherwise, stay and sort of weather the disruption that a big construction project is going to have. So this plan is recommending both, dollars and staff time. I'll say there is, a limit to what we can do legally. So there is, I think, a strategic opportunity here to work with our partners, which includes Southeast Raleigh Promise. The plan itself talks a lot about St. Augustine, which, as far as we know, is looking to establish a sort of business alliance. I've told them to talk to you. If they haven't, it would be great for you to talk to them because I know you're doing similar work, and would love to participate with them. And as a big institution, they can, as a separate institution, they can do stuff that we can't. So we see that as really great timing for us to both work together on that. And yeah, there is direct recommendation for direct funding and other support that we can do. If a business alliance were to be created, just like other business alliances, other bids in other parts of the city. As far as property goes, you know, sometimes people reach out to our real estate office, or economic development office, which is very different than it used to be. I'm not sure how much that's happening anymore. And we do know when stuff is for sale, a lot of times they don't bother coming to us. So other than looking at listings, you know, we don't know everyone who's looking to sell. What Craig and his team have done is identified some strategic places on the corridor that would be great for redevelopment and community benefits, affordable housing, or other stuff. And so they've done some thinking about what that could look like. And there is some, like Craig was mentioning, some city-owned land or maybe county-owned land that we're looking at, either that we own or that we could potentially buy. So for instance, the Treywork Road Community Center, Raleigh Parks has a plan to redevelop that. That's not funded or anything, but sort of like an aspiration. They did a really preliminary study of what a new community center there would need and could look like. And we've talked to them about, having some sort of creative community center plus housing type of development to fulfill multiple needs. They're seemed really into that and love the idea of that, provided they get all their gym and all the stuff that they want. And so, yeah, there is some city-owned land or publicly owned land for sure that for us is a target. And then we do have some funding recommended from the equity fund for acquisition, and that is sort of opportunistic as those sites come up and we see them or someone approaches the city, that we have money set aside so that we can jump on that. I don't know how close our finger is on the pulse of everyone selling property, redeveloping property. Not as great as we would like, but
I will say one of our action items is to create sort of a storefront community resource space that whether it's a contractor or city staff or it's just meant to be sort of an educational component, again, that sustained educational communication portal that people can come into. If they're thinking about selling their land, they can at least know what their options are. They can understand the development potential of their site potentially. It's about making sure people know the wealth that their land has and helping them guide that decision and let them make that decision rightfully, rather than a developer knocking on their door and they don't really know what those potential pieces are. So I think it's going to be, once that gets up and running, you're going to have a better idea of who is wanting to sell their land because they may walk in the door and talk to the city about that. Did that answer your questions? Sorry. You had really good detailed questions today.
I do believe in that approach. That's about information and education for people who are landowners, so they won't be taken advantage of should they be approached. And it is their land, they can sell it, keep it, develop it. But I know even if you have a desire to develop it and you don't have the resources to do, I think that's where you start getting into the conversations around equity and equitable access to those resources and opportunities that allow people to do what they want with their land, should they so desire. So I'm glad to hear those conversations have been going on. One question, I don't mean to monopolize. What about the Richard B. Harrison Library?
Great question. We've thought of that as a strategic site, and it's been identified. But there's still conversation with Wake County. I mean, there's some really great examples of library sites and other cities being transformed into more of a mixed use property. Chicago has done a really good job of this, of putting affordable housing and senior housing on top of their library centers. So I think it could be a really unique opportunity for this area to talk about that and like what is what is that library as a center of community? What's its growth look like? What kinds of development could go on top of it? We're really talking about sort of the next story of these communities and the growth in that sense. So it's been identified, but there's no concrete plans, right? And we welcome that if the county wants to come forward with a plan. I think A, they're going to be rezoned, proposed to be rezoned for the TOD overlay, and B, we've already sort of planted that seed as an idea. There was a question here about street names. I just want to apologize. We didn't really have full street names on the maps tonight. The presentation that will be uploaded will have all those on there so you can easily see where you might be living in the area. There's a question here about southeastward New Hope Station connecting towards Kellum Wyatt Farm. Let's go to a mobility map here really quick.
Yeah, so I don't think that's going to be on the map. I believe that's on Rogers Lane on the south side of New Bern. Yeah, I think it's outside of the map area. It's
okay.
East of the map. Yeah, I have not heard anything that the county is moving towards development of that park. I think in the near term, the most likely route for people traveling to that area would be to go to the north side of New Bern Avenue and take Southall Road over to Corporation Parkway. That's probably the best bicycle route in the near term. In the future, the city is proposing some new street connections on our street plan. You can see one of them on this map that is parallel to New Bern, just on the south side. So that's the segment that we're showing in this plan, but actually that proposed street would continue to the east through the mobile home developments that are there and to reach Rogers Lane. The street plan streets are dependent on redevelopment of private property streets like that. And I know that mobile home development was actually recently purchased by a national company that kind of specializes in managing manufactured housing. That signals to me that it's probably not likely to redevelop in the next few years. There is another street that's south of there that basically follows a similar route and would also connect to Rogers Lane. So, in the long term, if there is enough redevelopment, those would be public street connections that would bring people from farther east over to this area. But I think in the near term, the north side is really going to be the primary connection, or continuing far enough south to reach the Crabtree Creek Greenway.
We have noted that you can see some arrows kind of going outside of our study area. That we note that on purpose, primarily because of those opportunities to connect to different destinations. So while this is sort of hyper focused on the corridor, there are sort of a signal to future planning to make sure that those are top of mind. So we have about 4 or 5 minutes left in our time here. Are there any other? I know we threw a lot at you tonight. I really appreciate these questions. It's good dialogue.
Someone didn't have another question. I have one, but I will yield. So I've already asked a couple of questions. Okay. But I want to also, I'll plug this, and I think I've said this to you, Ira, and others before, the idea that the upward pressures that a BRT route puts on nearby neighborhoods, right? The impact on the nearby residential neighborhoods that are now or already highly desirable. But once this BRT route is activated, it will, increase that exponentially. And so I think it goes to the conversation that people are having in the community about property taxes and home values going up. And I think on one hand, it's good that you build equity, and that's why you get into, why you buy a home, at least partly why you buy a home. But the other downside to that is that people who live in these communities nearby the BRT route are, and I see you're pointing to a slide, and gonna tell me that there are monies set aside to help offset the cost of the increased cost of property taxes?
Yes, yes, actually, great question. I was trying to find it without being too distracting, but yes, we are looking at property tax relief between $150,000 and $500,000 additional funding annually. The reason we put that range is we're going to have to monitor that and see what that looks like. But that is definitely top of mind. There's also money looking at funding repairs to existing homes. We heard that was a number of concerns. And that's why, so it's between $300,000 and $600,000 annually for 4 years. It will need to be revisited every 4 years just as a monitoring component. I think that's a big outcome of this project is annual reporting to the community of what's happening and what adjustments may need to happen. But yes, you will see that pressure happen, and we're trying to keep that top of mind.
I'm glad to hear that you all were listening. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Yvette. Another point where we would love strong collaboration with Wake County if we could swing it. And we are working on that and thinking about that for sure. This is a point before we end tonight where I do want to make two more points. One is, and John sort of mentioned it earlier about the zoning. None of this is guaranteed. This is what we're putting in front of City Council to approve and adopt. So this is all from staff and our consultant and what we heard from the community, but it still has to go through the review process and adoption process for all these types of plans. And then council's got to, some of this, we have bond money for some of the transportation stuff. There's an old bond from 2017 or 18 that our transportation department told us there's some money available. And we jumped on that. But some of the stuff that's more looking in the future funding, yeah, we're telling council they need to fund it. It's going to be up to them and people who pay attention to them and vote for them to agree. The other thing is there is a survey open, and you can say how important all these recommendations are to you. You can prioritize them. So that can be very helpful for us to stand up in front of City Council and say, this is what Craig and his team wrote, and staff has looked at and supports, and the community says this is really important to them. And here's all the, dozens or hundreds, maybe, hopefully, of people who took our survey and looked at all these things. And that can be pretty impactful when it comes time to budget year, right? Which is coming up soon. So I'm not going to be in this budget year, but fiscal year 2024 we'll be starting planning for next June, May, June. We can point back to this plan and said, remember that thing you approved that had lots of community support? You need to put your nickel down. So that's just a plug for the survey and a bit of a reminder of where we are. But yeah, based on what we think we can do about property tax issues itself, like Craig is and the team there has identified, yeah, 150 to 500K for a couple of years, 2 to 5 years. So we think that's doable. We think that'll help. Council agrees.
The reason it's medium term, that 2 to 5 years, is exactly what Ira was saying, is it has to be in that 2024 budget cycle. So we have sort of a gap component here while we get this approved and then the funding. So there may be some gap opportunities there to mitigate that while it gets in the budget. But yeah, survey. We'll post this presentation tomorrow, so everybody has a chance to review it as well and think about these things. And we will be coming back with a more formal publishing of reports and final recommendations here in the next few weeks. So I want to thank everybody for your time. It's been almost a year now of how we kicked off this process. I'm happy to hear you're starting to see concerns and recommendations coming forward that meet the challenge of the road. But again, we just need everybody to review this and comment so that we make sure we get it right, and that we can move forward and advocate to Commission and Council that these are the absolute policies that need to happen to grow together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Bye.
You too.
Bueno.
Phyllis,